Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. This video is sponsored by Southern New Hampshire University and their online degree in computer game programming. More on that later. In a prior video, I discussed my worries about the state of Tony Zerovich's quantum economics system for Star Citizen. My worries were based on no mention all in either of the last two CitizenCons, no mention at the recent SCL segment on the economics team, and Benoit Bozinger's recent statement that it was not being worked on. Then in a subsequent video, I set out my theory about the reasons why it might be having trouble scaling to the eventual size of the verse, and started setting out my ideas for a radically simplified set of presumptions for a system that I dubbed Rayonomics, to emphasize that it was just my ideas and not a promise or demand from CIG. The first simplification was that rather than trying to simulate the decisions of hundreds of thousands of independent pilots, to instead simulate on the decision-making of companies that employed those pilots. The second simplification was that rather than considering every single point-to-point combination for every shipment, to presume that, just like real-world logistic companies like UPS, Amazon, and FedEx, they use a branching network of sorting centers and major hubs. Now I'm going to expand further about Rayonomics. Now the first question about any dynamic economy system in a game is, what makes it dynamic? What are the forces that cause prices to raise and lower? Not only that, but how do you make that understandable to the player? Because you can have this wonderful simulation running in the background, but if there's no visibility of it to the player, it might as well just be random number generator. In Tony Zerovich's talk, he described methods very familiar to terrestrial microeconomics and macroeconomics, supply disruptions, new sources of supply or demand, etc. But in the verse, there's another much larger and more obvious cause of dynamic fluctuation, and that is astroeconomics. And astroeconomics is real. It is why NASA has launch windows to various missions to other planets and celestial bodies. Because planets move, and sometimes it takes a lot less energy to get there than others. Imagine an Earth where 1 month Tokyo and Los Angeles are where they are now, and in a few months, Tokyo is as close to LA as San Francisco, while at the same time New York is now further away than London. What effect would that have on travel, trade, the price of imported goods, or how much it'll take to get to CitizenCon? Huge, of course. So, get the planets moving as they should, and you will have all the dynamic economy you need. You really don't need to simulate all the other stuff because astroeconomics is overwhelmingly more significant. Which is a good point to segue to this video's sponsor, the online Bachelor of Science in Computer Game Programming from Southern New Hampshire University. Because in astroeconomics, things are more affordable when they are nearer. And if you've had to leave college uncompleted, that degree can seem an impossibly far-away thing to return to. But an online degree brings that reality as close as possible, particularly one with a marketable career skills like the over 200 different ones offered by SNHU, including fields like computer game programming and computer game art. If this sounds interesting, visit snhu.edu/raisguide and fill out the form to talk to a real person about how you can bring your future closer. That's snhu.edu/raisguide. Returning to the astroeconomics of Rayonomics, although planets are in constant motion, it is not such that positions have to be calculated in real time. They can reasonably be made daily recalculations of the distance between sites and publishing a new map view, which at the scale of a solar system or planetary system will not change much from one day to the next. Similarly, locations would be taking inventory and making pricing decisions at a scheduled time rather than constantly. This brings up an important fact, and that is that both planetary movement and the game economy must be calculated at the global level, not at the shard level. To do it at the shard level would mean that somebody could buy a commodity and load up a ship at the low-cost shard and then log out and log in on a high-cost shard and then sell for profit without moving an inch. And that would allow market manipulation. By buying a bunch of commodity at one shard and then selling it on a different shard, you would be creating shortages on the one shard and surplus on the other. So the economy and planetary positions must be global for all shards, as they are now. Now, there are 3 main types of goods and 5 main types of locations under Rayonomics. The 3 types of goods are commodities, components, and completed. The 5 types of locations are production, fabrication, assembly, consumption, and distribution. Production locations are mines and refineries that produce commodities such as titanium, tungsten, iron, copper, industrial diamonds, etc. The main thing about commodities is that they are fungible. A ton of titanium is a ton of titanium, whether it was created by an NPC, or if a player mined and refined the ore, or if a player bought it in one place in hopes of selling it for profit elsewhere. Fabrication centers take commodities and create components from them. For example, electronics components, mechanical components, explosives, textiles, etc. These are not fungible. While the box may say electronics component, and that is perfectly sufficient for customs inspections and freight rates and the description of what is being shipped for a cargo job, what is inside the box are very specific components that the buyer ordered from the seller, and if, for example, it was stolen, the chance that it actually contained what somebody else needed as electronics components is almost nil. Imagine needing microprocessors for completing a project, but the box containing electronics components contained thermocouples, or needing self-sealing stem bolts and having a box full of scutcheon plates. So looted components from a ship doing cargo mission could not be used to sell as components to some other destination, but instead liquidated at a no-questions-asked salvage yard. Assembly centers take component goods and perhaps some commodity goods and create completed goods. For example, taking mechanical components, machine metals, electronic components, and explosives to create armaments. Other examples of finished goods might include clothing, armors, processed food, medical supplies, etc. These are also non-fungible, but carry less of a penalty when liquidated because it's easier generally to find a buyer for them. Note that this means that few of the things that we currently are regarding as fungible trade goods, particularly processed foods, distilled spirits, and medical supplies, will become non-fungible cargo mission contents, but they can be backfilled with plenty of other fungible commodities. Consumption centers are where buyers of completed goods exist. In fact, pretty much every place is a little bit of a consumption center, at least to take care of their own workers and facilities. Distribution centers are where inventory is aggregated. They come in 3 tiers. The first are planetary distribution centers for certain categories of goods. These include the new distribution centers in 3.23 and landing zones. Production centers deliver their produced goods to distribution centers, and then any fabrication or assembly site in the same area needing those commodities orders them from the distribution center, not directly from the producer. The second tier of distribution centers is the orbital cargo decks above the planet. They function as an aggregator of the excess or deficit from the entire planet. Distribution centers with too much of something send it to the cargo deck, and distribution centers whose inventory for something is running low request it of the cargo deck. Then as the cargo decks build high or low inventory of something, they will first see if they can trade with other cargo decks. But if it turns out the entire Stanton system is building up a surplus or shortage of something, then they deal with the topmost tier of distribution centers, and those are the cargo stations at the jump points. These cargo gateways represent proxies for all of the still unbuilt verse that exists beyond the jump point. So how does all this work, and what does it have to do with the price of potatoes? Every place has formulas for what it needs and produces. For example, a mine has a formula where it converts a certain quantity of processed food and medical supplies into a very large quantity of, say, laranite. The electronics fab might convert a certain proportion of silicon, copper, tin, etc. to electronics components. Now, these are not precisely the formulas that would also be used for crafting because they don't have to be as detailed, and the location might be self-sufficient in some items. That is an important thing to understand when devising the numbers. Our Corp, for example, does not have to import everything it needs and does not have to export everything it produces. It only has to import what it can't produce internally and only has to export what it doesn't need for itself. That is why you might have missions within a distribution center itself to move goods from the warehousing area to the production area and back. Now, key to this is the inventory cycle, which I will, for simplicity's sake, simply call a day. It won't actually be a real-world day. Every goods at its location has a minimum number of days needs to have an inventory and a maximum number of days inventory that it wants to have. First, they calculate the goods that they are creating. If they have near a minimum days inventory, they will try to increase the production by 5%, presuming that they have the raw materials, and if it's a fungible commodity, increase the price by, let's say, 2%. If they are near their maximum days inventory, they will reduce the price by the same percentage and cut production so that they don't exceed their maximum desired inventory. Second, they calculate the goods that the location uses for the production. And if they have less than the minimum number of days inventory, they will increase the price they're willing to pay by, let's say, 5%. and if they have near the maximum day's inventory, they will cut the price, hoping to save money. Third, the site then calculates for goods that they will use how much they would be willing to buy and not exceed their maximum inventory level. If they need goods to get to their minimum level, the quantity to get to their minimum level would be marked rush and carry an extra 5% price. For the goods they produce, it calculates the quantity that they would take them to their minimum inventory level, and any quantity level that we need to take them above their maximum inventory level would be marked rush. It then creates the cargo missions. For non-fungible cargoes, the missions would have the description, I need to have quantity of SCU of name of goods delivered from here to name of the distribution center, and then optionally rush. Or I need to have quantity of SCU of name of the goods delivered from distribution centers to here. Now, rather than expecting the system to have to create a whole variety of different sized missions to accommodate haulers of all size, it would be easier to allow you to take a fractional part of the mission. So, for example, if the mission is for 600 SCU and you can accept 10% of it for 60 SCU, at which point the remaining mission becomes for 540 SCU. The payment for these missions is based on distance, danger, rush bonus, and if the type of goods requires a pilot of a certain reputation to be bonded. Rush missions must be completed by the end of the same inventory period so as not to lose reputation. Otherwise, by the end of the following inventory period. For fungible commodities, the description only includes either the source or the destination. In other words, I need quantity of SCU delivered to here for price, or I have quantity of SCU available for purchase at price. That way, you can develop your own point-to-point trade routes, or if you have, for example, mined your own supply of the commodity, only take the delivery side. Profit is, of course, based on how much you can make on the buy-sell spread. During the remainder of the inventory cycle, the distribution center uses a presumed number of its own delivery pilots to gradually reduce the number of missions by completing them, starting with the rush missions and then the shortest missions. Meanwhile, the distribution centers go through the same process, except that their minimum inventory level for things is what was shipped from them in the last 2 days, and the maximum inventory level is what was shipped from them in the last 10. And their surplus and shortages create missions to the cargo deck for the planet. Then the cargo decks follow the same process to create missions between the cargo decks. And if no cargo deck is accepting or supplying that goods, then the appropriate planetary gateway. This planetary gateway functions as the great flywheel of the dynamic economy. Individual areas will experience fluctuations as supplies and demands get closer and further apart with Astroeconomics, but the system as a whole should stay within the bounds as CIG should be able to tweak it with only a few adjustments at the gateways. Now, I know this is a lot to cover, and so feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I'll make an extra effort to answer them. Now, for an update on our giveaways, we continue to make progress to our goals of giving away the Zippy Zazzy Zaftig Zephyr, the Zeus 2 cargo, as well as our larger goal of the magnificent multi-role mining meta, the Arasta. 1 entry per video. Be a member for automatic entry on any video published while your membership is active, or subscribe and comment using the secret word. And the secret word for this video, what causes prices to fluctuate under Rayonomics. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.